Hello, everyone. I'm Afton, and I'll be doing our article presentation for this week. It's called Measuring Principal Performance, How Rigorous Are Commonly Used Principal Performance Assessment Instruments. So, measuring principal performance. How rigorous are the assessments that educators use to evaluate principals in the school? Assessing school principal performance is necessary and challenging, but it must be done. Principals are secondary only to classroom teachers as the most influential school factor on student achievement. The two types of assessment that we've learned are formative and summative. Well, what's the difference? Summative assessments tend to inform a decision about the person taking the assessment's competence. For example, for the Georgia milestones for our students that they take at the end of the year, that evaluates their competency and what they've learned for that year. Formative assessments is also a measure of competence, but results are used to inform future actions. So it's like an assessment you take along the way, like the tests that teachers give before the Georgia milestones. So future actions can, teachers will use those to either reteach what they have to teach or move on to the next standard. What is the purpose of this review or article? It addresses the importance of standard-based measures, need for establishing reliability and validity, measures that are more widely accepted and psychometrically sound. These measures are intended to evaluate principal performance and have varying degrees of publicly available evidence of psychometrically testing. And they're also intended to inform decision makers' selection of job performance instruments used for hiring, performance instruments, and tenure decisions. Principals should have standards to be assessed by, just like students and teachers do. All right, new standards for principal performance. The Educational Leadership Policy Standards, which is they call ISL/LC in the article, are a widely recognized and referenced principal standards list. The ISL/LC contains 6 domains for principal professional practice. Domain 1 is setting a widely shared vision for learning, developing a school culture instructional program conducive to student learning and staff professional growth, ensuring effective management of the organization, operation, and resources for a safe, efficient, and effective learning environment, collaborating with faculty and community members, responding to diverse community interests and needs, and mobilizing community resources, acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner, understanding, responding to, and influencing the political, social, legal, and cultural context. Those are their 6 domains. School principals are being asked to ensure that all students have access to high-quality instruction and that all teachers are held accountable for student learning. Principals must work within a well-formed ethical code to oversee instructional quality, develop teacher talents, establish a learning culture in schools, and work within and beyond the school to secure financial, human, and political capital to maintain and advance organizational operations. This article does a lot with reliability and validity, which we'll discuss later on, but just to introduce it, reliability is the measure of consistency and stability. A measure of reliability when the responses are consistent and stable for each individual who takes a test. So if all factors remain the same, then the test taker should make relatively the same score. Validity is broken down into 2 in this article, is content validity and construct validity. In content validity is established by ensuring that the test items under consideration measure all of the dimensions or facts of a given construct like principal performance. Content validity can be established by aligning the test or other items to a set of standards or practices, such as leadership effectiveness. Construct validity is determined by the degree to which test items measure a construct, which is the element that the item's meaning to assess. A construct may be any standard that you evaluate. The review measures, this is how they evaluated the assessments that they did in the research. The assessments selected is their original research came up with 5,000 original articles. Only 20 out of those 5,000 made it, and only 8 of those actually provided reliable and valid. Articles that did not have any documentation were omitted. Articles had to report that the assessment was intended for use as a performance assessment, had psychometrically tested for reliability and validity, publicly available for purchase. The Learning Point Associates conducted a search on Google Scholar to locate school principal performance assessment instruments. When we talk about psychometrically sound, it means that the instrument must be tested for validity and reliability using accepted testing measures. A minimum reliability rating of 0.5 or 0.75 must have been achieved, as well as content and or construct validity must have occurred to reach the final articles that they researched. Now, so these are we're going to go over the 8 assessments that they came up with when doing the research. The first one is Change Facilitator Style Questionnaire. Van Denberg developed the Change Facilitator Style Questionnaire to measure the extent to which leaders can facilitate change. It included 3 different clusters. Each cluster had 2 different scales. The first cluster was concern for people. Second cluster was organizational efficiency. And the second cluster was strategic sense. As you can see, if you look at the chart, there was no time requested while doing the assessment. And the content validity and the construct validity through this assessment is there. We'll discuss why it was rated poor later on when we go over the findings. Basically, if it rated in between if it was rated below anything 0.8, it was given a score of a poor reliability. The next assessment we are going to go over is the Diagnostic Assessment of School and Principal Effectiveness. Ebmeyer developed this measure to identify the strengths of schools and their leaders so that school improvement plans and principal professional development goals would be better informed. The measure indicated how these groups view themselves, school leadership, and school performance. If you look at the approach that they took, it's a 360-degree evaluation focused on educational leadership. It was a 213-item survey independently completed by students, teachers, principals, and others like principal supervisors, and results combined into a score. The time required to take the survey was 30 to 40 minutes. The reliability for that is moderate, and moderate is anywhere between 0.8 and 0.9. The next assessment we're going to look at is the Instructional Activity Questionnaire. This measure was developed by Larson as a performance assessment tool that specifically addresses instructional leadership aspects of principals' work. The measure was developed through an extensive review of the principal effectiveness literature. It is also a questionnaire. It's a 35-item questionnaire. covers 3 subscales that specifically address instructional leadership. Again, there was no time for this assessment to be conducted, and it resulted in a moderate reliability. The coefficient ranges from 0.7 to 0.9, so the mid of that is right there at 0.8 reliability. The next one we're going to go over is the Leadership Practices Inventory. They developed the Leadership Practice Inventory by extensively interviewing and surveying leaders, including principals, to identify best leadership practices. LPI's domains are as follows, which are the practices that they came up with, is modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, challenging the process, enabling others to act, and encouraging the heart. If you take a look, it's a 71-item, it's a 30-item measure of general leadership process practices to be completed by the principal and an observer or supervisor. This one's widely used to measure leadership effectiveness across the country, but it is a poor reliability, as it gave a score of 0.79. Performance Review, Analysis, and Improvement System for Education, they call PRAISE for short. PRAISE's assessment system was developed through an extensive review of school administrator effectiveness literature. PRAISE domains are not specifically aligned with professional standards. PRAISE domains are problem solving, relations with teachers, and professional qualities and competencies. If you take a look at PRAISE, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It's an 81-item assessment that includes 9 subscales, and it gives you a moderate reliability score between 0.88 and 0.98. Moving on to the next one is Principal Instructional Management Rating Scale. They developed the Principal Instructional Management Rating Scale to determine the degree to which principals serve as instructional managers. PIMRS focuses on several constructs, including the dedicated use of time for improving instruction, coordinating curriculum, and evaluating instruction. The last 2 that we are going to look at is the Principal Profile. It was developed through extensive interview and consultation with principals, teachers, superintendents, and department heads. 2 key assumptions inform the tool. 1, student growth should be a benchmark for school leader effectiveness and a factor in performance evaluation. And 2, school leader effectiveness is marked by consistency of actions. If you take a look at the chart, the interview-based assessment technique that measures leadership effectiveness on certain tasks and characterizes leadership style. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and the reliability turned out to be poor. Inter-rater agreement from 0.5 to 1.0. The last assessment that they wrote about was the Vanderbilt Assessment of Leadership in Education, VAL-ED for short. It has become one of the most widely used and respected measures of school leadership performance assessment. VAL-ED assesses principal performance by gathering information from principals, teachers, and principal supervisors. It is a 360-degree assessment tool to be administered to principals, teachers, and principal supervisors. Consists of 72 items, and it produced a quantitative diagnostic profile, which is like numbers, a number profile that it produces. And it is linked to the ISL/LC standards that I discussed at the beginning of the presentation. It takes about 20 minutes, and the reliability of this assessment is high, as it gives a 0.98 for all 12 skills on different forms. The findings of the study, out of the 20 assessments, only 8 met the criteria for rigor, which are the 8 we went over. 2 out of the 8 were created in the last decade. All others were created 10 to 20 years ago. Due to the emphasis on instructional leadership, data-based decision-making, community involvement, and other well-documented changes to the school principal position in the last 10 years, it is possible that older measures do not capture the essential features for the position. Few assessments are made for public review, and each assessment measures different roles that the principal must carry out. Different data collection approaches. Data from the assessments will only achieve the desired results if the principal and the supervisor view the data and give weight to the results during their evaluations. The relevance to the chapter reading that we had. The main relevance that I found was the reliability and the validity. That's what we do. That's what we consider for the criteria of good measuring instruments. So we're going to dive in a little bit to the reliability. Reliability is the degree to which a test consistently measures whatever it is measuring. So just like being reliable is reliability. The first type of reliability is stability. That's usually the test-retest form. Is the degree to which scores on the same test are consistent over time. You do this by testing one group using a test and then testing another group using the same test and then correlate those two scores. The equivalence is the degree to which two similar forms of a test produce similar scores from a single group of test takers. So you do this by giving the same group of test takers two different tests that measure the same content and then correlate those two scores. Equivalence and stability, that's the combination of the first two. Give one group of test takers a test, then wait a while and give the same group the different test, and then correlate the scores between those two tests. Internal consistency is the extent to which the items in a test are similar to one another in content. This includes split half reliability. And what split half reliability is when you take a test, you split it in half, say all evens or all odds, and then you evaluate the scores according to the two halves. The last one is score rater. The score is very, it can be very subjective. The two things that they went over in the chapter is the interjudge, which refers to the consistency of two or more independent scores, raters, or observers. And the intra-judge refers to the consistency of one individual scoring, rating, or observing over time. Validity, just like reliability is reliable, validity is valid. Is the test valid? It refers to the degree to which a test measures what it is supposed to measure and consequently permits appropriate interpretation of scores. Content validity is the degree to which a test measures an intended content area, includes item validity, which is considered with whether the items are relevant to the measurement of the intended content area, and sample validity, which is concerned with how well the test samples the total content area being tested. The purpose of this validity is to what extent does the test represent the general domain of interest. Criterion-related validity is determined by relating performance on a test to performance on a second test or other measure. The purpose is to what extent does this test correlate highly with another test. Concurrent validity is the degree to which scores on one test are related to scores on a similar pre-existing test administered in the same time frame or to some other valid measure available at that time. The purpose is to what extent does this test reflect the construct to its intended measure. Construct it is intended to measure. Consequential validity is the most important form of validity because it asks the fundamental validity question. What is the test really measuring? And the purpose of this is to what extent does the test create harmful consequences for the test taker? Here's the reference for the article that I just presented on. And Thank you. I hope I covered the article well.